How would you feel about school taking up an extra hour every day to teach basic adult stuff like washing clothes, basic cooking, and paying taxes? My rural school did this in the OOs. Home economics, sewing, taxes, cooking, woodworking, etc. Could even get into metalworking, accounting, quilting, pottery, etc. if you wanted to. My school did the same. I was a good student, but at that age you just don't realize the valuable information they're giving you. You kept the information long enough to pass the tests, and then you went and got alcohol poisoning in a field while your parents thought you were at a movie with Nicole and Becky. Nothing like drinking a whole Four Loko at a waterfall half a mile from the nearest road and then having to dive in to prevent your friend from drowning because she went over the fall with the current and was way more drunk than you. Nothing like the fondness of looking back on past decisions and wondering how you are still alive. I had a buddy I swam with in HS, he was a few years younger than me, dive into a quarry while we were all drunk. It took the rescue divers 4 hours to find his body. That crap'll F you up. Edit. I think it might be unclear, I was 20 at the time, he was 18. We had swum on the same club team when I was in high school. My high school, 2 guys went out in a canoe while drunk. It capsized, and the drunker one drowned. This was the day after the prom. Monday sucked. Some of life's hardest lessons right here, persevering face. If you or someone you know didn't almost drown for some reason at a party by the river in the woods, did you even high school? I spent my high school years indulging in drugs, and it made my mental health from 20 to 23 a living hell. Why did I even high school? My dad made me take a class on car maintenance when I was in high school. Nothing sank in whatsoever. I'm in this comment and I feel personally attacked. Hi Becky. My home economics class had groups of 3 students try to make one pot of spaghetti, and every single group spaghetti was inedible in different ways, and it made me afraid to try cooking again. We did that but with cookies and biscuits. We learned how using too much of this or too little of that would affect a recipe. If you learn those things, you can make cookies and go, I want them to be more chewy, and know exactly what to start adjusting. This is kind of the basis for home economics, the main subject I teach, as it is these days in Australia. It's moved towards solution-based problem solving. Students learn about how ingredients interact with one another under different conditions, they learn about nutrition, they learn about technology in food, ranging from how UHT works to GMOs to drones in agriculture, about ethics in the food industry, food security, marketing, sustainability, etc. It's a huge subject. In their last couple of years they can choose to do a subject that is focused on cooking and the hospitality industry, but they can also choose more academic subjects around food and or health, so up until then we cover all the stuff they need to know and be capable of doing to go either way. Kids fresh into high school start super basic and make a couple of very easy things with the real purpose of teaching them to be safe, work both independently and with others, write and follow a plan based on a recipe, and clean up properly. It's also when we start teaching them why they need to use brown versus white sugar and keep eggs out of the fridge for baking, etc. At my school it's mandatory in their first year, and after that they can choose. Edit. Since everyone is asking about the eggs. If you have room temperature butter and then add cold eggs, the fat in your butter is going to be unhappy and get cold. If you've ever creamed butter and sugar together only for it to go lumpy once you add eggs, it's probably because the eggs were too cold. The effect this has on a cake is that it ends up denser than it should be. If it happens, trying folding some flour through the mixture but not too much. If the recipe says the butter is room temperature, your eggs probably should be too. Man, I would have loved to take that. Back at my school in California, home economics was seen as a filler class for burnouts, and if you were in advanced classes you were discouraged from taking it. Oh, believe me, that's still what all the other teachers and students think about this subject. Our subject is like a nice little secret we share with the students who decide to give it a chance. I find it's a good opportunity for students who aren't so academically inclined to realize they're actually capable of the literacy and numeracy and problem-solving skills they need in other subjects, because we kind of trick them into all this theory work by making it about food, and then all the application of that theory gets a practical project that results in food for them to eat. That's a fantastic thing to be imparting to young people. So many end up being disabled by their own ignorance of fundamental life knowledge and skills. Feeding yourself well is such a foundation skill of being a human. I wish people would stop thinking that I did home economics as part of VCE as well as chemistry, physics and bio, and found it to be significantly harder than those 3 subjects. The theory is a bit easier, sure, but my god, you have to work so hard in that subject. With science, once you get it, it's actually not nearly as much work, it's just here's a question, now solve it. I'd argue home economics teaches you way more skills you'd use in the workplace, regardless of whether you end up in a kitchen or an office. Haha. I'm absolutely rubbish at the theory side of home economics, but I'm actually pretty decent at the actual cooking side. I know they're supposed to be connected, but just can't wrap my head round the theory. I always wanted to take a class like that, but they never had anything like that at my school. Then, after I got my costuming degree, I looked into teaching home economics kind of sewing stuff, and there's next to nothing here, too. And when I looked at volunteering to teach these sort of classes, how to fit clothing you've bought, how to lengthen or shorten hems and sleeves, what makes a good piece of clothing worth investing in versus something cheap not worth the effort, how to clean clothes. You get the idea. I got basically told those aren't skills kids need. Which is dumb as hell. No matter how much money you have, if you don't buy good clothes and if you don't spend money fitting them or know how to do it yourself, you'll look like a schlub. Plus, who knows? Quilting might become someone's hobby or passion just for having tried it. Hey, I think I would love to know these things. Do you know any online resources that could help me with learning? This sounds incredible and is so desperately needed in more places. So many young people coming out of school with very few skills or practical knowledge. It used to be so common to have home economics classes, and they've stopped them most places. I was on the cusp when they had just stopped, but we still had other practical courses like woodworking, parenting, etc. You can see a drastic difference in today's younger adults and teenagers with very few home skills because so many in my generation don't know how to teach these skills. It has such a ripple effect. My class, we had several groups that added 2 cups of salt and pinch of sugar. Turns out that's a good way to make a very bad cookie. You could throw those on the sidewalks to melt ice. Pretty sure on some of them a snail wouldn't have even been able to cross the whole cookie without dying first. I would like to start a petition to make this the new measure of salt concentration. Lane, snail distance, versus time. So, what is it? Share the knowledge. Information is meant to be free. And cookies are meant to be chewy. I don't remember, middle school was more than half my lifetime ago now. Google says instead of using a whole egg, use 2 egg yolks. I'm pretty sure the temperature and softness of your butter has an effect, too. Yep, an extra egg yolk will help this. Also, you need to cream the butter and sugar for like 6 to 7 minutes, if doing this by hand probably like 10 minutes. It should be much lighter in color. Brown sugar adds some moisture. Always use butter. Real if possible. Chilling the dough has always been a battle for me. I do chill the dough for like 30 minutes, I used to chill the dough overnight. I don't see much of a difference in the two. But you should chill it for at least 30 minutes. I always start with 2 minutes less baking time than recommended, and check on them. As soon as the edges have even a little color, I take them out to cool, as they will still bake for a couple minutes. Always the middle rack. Not top or bottom. Don't overmix when combining wet and dry ingredients. Sift your dry ingredients. I never do this because I'm too lazy, but it does help. Cool them on a rack. Edit. Thank you for the silver, my first award ever. Chilled batter makes for softer, chewier cookies. I found butter makes a chewy cookie, shortening makes a crispier cookie. You can also mix both to edit any recipe to your liking. Pro tip. I use coconut oil and you get chewy centers with a crisp edge. Cooking time and temp will also affect it. This is an excellent read if you're interested in all of that. Web link. Man, this is where I wish schools of thought within an actual school combined. Food science is so interesting and wild that if you actually knew the chemistry and everything behind making food, I think it would actually make things more interesting and make students grok it on both sides better. My middle school food classes had us start with how to follow/interpret basic recipes, like difference between a tablespoon and teaspoon, and nutrition. So by the time we hit high school, the foods teacher got us to have Iron Chef competitions where we would have access to a pantry/groceries and have to make an entree featuring a particular ingredient. Also, that teacher would hunt/fish on weekends, so showed us how to butcher our own cuts from a larger piece of whole beef and how to boil fresh caught crabs on a stove outside because the smell was really awful, like low tide on steroids. I've never done the butchering or crab boil since then, but I definitely got confident enough to improvise a meal out of whatever I happened to have on hand. That sounds amazing. I bet even without butchering you learned so much in that class. I'm so jealous. Our HS cut home economics courses like 2 years before I got there, so I can't even operate a sewing machine. Food science is so fascinating to me, but I don't really have the money to go back to school to learn it practically. You definitely should try again. It's a rare skill to have. I still have nightmares from the time I made spaghetti when I was 13. Apparently, after you drain the water from the spaghetti, you're not supposed to put the spaghetti back on the stove. Who knew? It's super delicious if you slightly undercook the spaghetti, put it in the sauce, put it back on the stove, and let it finish cooking in the sauce. And then add like a cup of the pasta water. This is the only proper way to make pasta in my opinion. I'll put it back on the stove after it's turned off, and I've already added some oil or butter to the pasketers. Keeps it warm. That's terrible. Please don't be afraid to cook. I'm a good cook and I'd screw something up if 2 other people were in the kitchen also trying to cook it. Message me if you want, you can have my spaghetti recipes. We have to make actual food, like lasagna, cinnamon buns, macaron and the like. We have this in Sweden. Sewing and woodworking are the 2 options of crafting class. You get to try both and then pick one to stick with. We have hemkunskap, maybe it's called something different now. This is middle school/junior high stuff and I'm 30 this year, so been a while, directly translating to home knowledge, where, at least when I did it, mostly did cooking, but there was some classes and tests on washing clothes, cleaning and such things. Some home economy as well. There was nothing on taxes as far as I know, but here I pay taxes by logging into our equivalent of the IRS's website and press a button. That sucks that you only take one. 100%. As a guy in high school, I would have continued taking woodworking. When I was in high school, I didn't take woodworking but took auto instead. But 100%, as an adult, sewing is more useful to me than woodworking would ever be. I'm not sure which is the norm, but in my Swedish school, we didn't have to choose between them, we got to do both. Home economics is where I learned to sew a cat face pillow, make a bechamel/white sauce, change the oil in my car, and file my taxes. And speaking of taxes, why are my taxes going into some billionaire's pocket instead of paying teachers to teach kids these basic skills? Home economics made me make a brownie in 20 minutes, didn't work, and sew a button. The rest of the time our professor had us use it as a study hour so she could sit in the back. Looking back, I think she was hungover. Because self-reliant people are not ideal consumers. Why teach people how to change oil or sew when you can sell them as products or services? At least 3 of those are actually school subjects. You can choose to do cooking or metal work or business studies at lots of schools. They are just electives most of the time because they're not used for university admission. I'd be opposed to the extra hour. But not the activity. School was already an 8-hour-a-day thing. Pushing it up to 9 hours means it actually becomes longer than a full-time job. And that's before you get to homework and crap like that. If anything, the school day should be shorter. Or keep it 8 hours in the building, but leave 2 or 3 of those for students to work on homework with a teacher around when they need help/guidance, or just for them to socialize in a somewhat structured way. Expecting kids/teens to maintain any level of engagement and discipline for 8 hours straight is psychotic. It's a system built by nerds and sadists. Yep, kids are already overworked as are adults. We'd all benefit from a reduction in work. Yep, kids are already overworked as are adults. We'd all benefit from a reduction in work. But school is just too long, he spoke, for all us tiny younger folk, whose lives are hard enough ahead for years to come, and that's a joke. With just a little time, he said, an extra hour or 2 in bed, we'd all be sweet and starry-eyed, and well prepared to work instead. And though his words were justified, his teacher sadly so replied, just wait until you're old, he sighed, just wait until you're old, he sighed. To be honest, I have so far found work to be a lot less stressful and time-consuming than school. Definitely depends on the job and the school, but it was just funny, like old fellas were all just wait till you get a job, and then I did, and I was like, dang, you mean I don't have to stay up till 2 a.m. every other night just to get decent grades? Yes. I have a professional, salaried job where I'm expected to be available nearly 24/7. And the number of extra hours I put in is a tiny fraction of the time high schoolers are expected to spend working on homework. Preparing you for the real world, my ass. So it worked. High school was so bad that your job is a relief. Seems same as boot camp in the army. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.